What I am doing is taking the truth of God's word that applies to all of our lives, but I'm just trying to chop it up in a small enough piece that whatever demographic I'm targeting for that particular song can understand.
Finding music is not hard. All I have to do is go onto Spotify, Amazon Music, or Apple Music to receive a plethora of new musics that's flooding the world. Finding music that is of value, specifically for the soul, however, can be much more difficult. And if we're honest, it's even more burdensome to go through that music for children. Well, today I hope Cultivating Truth can be a resource for you. And as a fellow parent and a minister to youth and children, I know that finding music for children that you find appropriate and enjoyable can be an unpleasant experience. Music shapes worldview, and we need music that is catchy and fun, that will biblically shape our children, all while enjoying the beautiful gift that the Lord has blessed us with through our ears. This topic is what leads me to today's guest, a fellow minister in the gospel who has devoted her ministry to music and children. Today, we are pleased to welcome Yancy to the Cultivating Truth podcast. Yes, that is Yancy, not Nancy, as her website would suggest. Yancy is a 2-time Dove Award winner, and she makes music that makes Jesus loud. She is a worship leader, songwriter, and producer for kids that travels around the globe doing family concerts and leading worship. She is passionate about creating worship resources for the church to disciple kids in worship. Some of Yancy's most notable work includes Little Praise Party and 2021 GMA Dove Award winner for Children's Music Album of the Year, Ready, Set, Go.
Super big, super strong, super wonderful, God,
So, Yancy, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Well, what's going on in your world, Yancy?
Well, I mean, all sorts of things, you know. I have been in the studio lately, have a couple new songs that I've been recording and making lyric videos for and all of that. And so that will be rolling out in the next few months. So watch out for those new singles. And then I'm doing a lot right now in the space of coaching worship leaders for Next Gen Ministry. So people that are doing that, working hard at it in their church. And so just helping them grow and bear more fruit. And that's been really fun. And then my other newer project at the moment is a podcast I'm doing called Stained Glass Kids. And I'm interviewing PKs and kids that have grown up in ministry and just learning more about their story and learning more about how we as church leaders can do ministry in a healthier way. And so all sorts of fun things in addition to being a mom of 2 boys and homeschooling them and all the things. So it's fun.
Yeah, all the things. And I think that that's really interesting that you got a wide variety of individuals that you're serving and ministering to. You got your children, obviously, and then worship leaders, and you're talking to pastor kids. Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you yourself came from this background. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. So I grew up, a PK as I considered it. My dad was never a senior pastor, but he has worked in churches my whole entire life, especially in the space of children's and family ministry. And so definitely something I grew up in, just being born and raised in church and set out to make music. And then somewhere along the way, the two things kind of got very mixed together. And that's to do music for kids and specifically to support the church. So it's been a fun journey.
Yeah. Where's home? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I lived in a few different southern places. I was born in Mississippi. I have one parent from Mississippi, one from Alabama. We lived in both places, and then lived out in Tulsa, Oklahoma for about 18 years. So I call it the middle chunk of my life. My dad was on staff at a church there, and then I moved to Tennessee. And so I've been here in the Nashville, Tennessee area since 2008. It's where my ministry is based, and it's a whole lot of fun.
Did you always know that you wanted to go into music or music ministry? Was there a difference back then?
Yeah, no, music was definitely something that I gravitated to in my early elementary years. So I kind of say that I really knew that God was calling me into that space from the time that I was single digits. It's not that there was a specific like time and place and like moment, but it was like once I started those piano lessons, once I started having some of those opportunities to be a part of some children's choirs and sing on some worship teams and start singing some special music songs, it just kind of all snowballed. And I feel like looking back on it, a lot of the adults that were in my life, I think somehow, some way were inclined to know that was kind of my path as well. And so music had always been my focus, and just took part of being a part of music however I could, throughout my teenage years, and serving on tons of different worship teams at churches, and just any opportunity I could get to play keyboard in a worship band or sing or lead and all of that. And then it all started coming together really when I was about 15 years old. I had my youth pastor ask me to do my very first concert ever and do that for my local youth group. And that really helped me take a bunch of steps forward to start my career.
Yeah. And so you eventually, you transition more. I guess, is it proper to say some of your biggest success has been through the music with kids ministry, right?
Yeah. So, I started off definitely much more on kind of a normal CCM music path. I mean, that was just, your normal Christian music that you hear on the radio is, kind of what I thought was my path and what I would do. And so I made my first album when I was 17. I was a senior in high school and started coming to Nashville and making connections, talking to labels, writing with other songwriters. And, I had some good things happen. I won an award as an independent artist with the Gospel Music Association called the Spotlight Competition. It's something that the group Jars of Clay had won the exact same thing before their career took off. And had a song that I wrote called I Don't Want to Go that a group called Avalon recorded. That song was #1 for 5 weeks on Christian radio, has made it on 2 greatest hits albums of theirs, was on the Wow Hits album for that year that, it had been off. And so, had some things that took off and were successful, but just nothing ever truly came together for my personal artist career as like a normal CCM artist. But kind of along that timeline, I started doing more and more in the worship leading space, not just me serving on a worship team, but actually being the worship leader, being the one responsible for some of these worship teams. And so that was probably about a 5-year time span. With 2 of those years, I ended up full-time on staff at our church. And if I'm honest, like in that season of life, there was a lot of tension, because on one hand, I knew that I felt like that's where I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to be doing. On the other hand, there was just a lot of frustration within that as well, because although there was some, as can happen in any church like staff world, sometimes there's dreams and vision of what you want something to be, and you're in the process of like steering a ship towards that path. And so we were in that transition point. And so it wasn't all the things that they hoped it would be. Therefore, some of the frustration, because I was part of like helping make that change happen. But I remember in that season of life, like kind of questioning it and being like, God, like, I don't understand. Did I miss it somewhere before? Like, if this is what you've called me to do, and I was convinced I was going to die working at that church, like at the end of my life. If this is what you've called me to do, then did I miss it somewhere before? Like, why did I go to Nashville and learn to write songs? Like, why did I learn how to record? Just like, because the pieces weren't making sense at where I was on the journey at that point. Fast forward a little bit more time, and that's really where I ended up stepping into the space of doing stuff for kids and stepping more so in the space as well of equipping, especially church leaders, just of how to do worship for kids well and all of these things. And I realized like, oh, like that stint in the church was needed because I was collecting some additional tools for my tool belt. Like the time in Nashville spent learning to record and write and produce and all of that, I would need that down the road, just like I would need knowing what it's like to actually lead worship teams, work in a church, like all of those things of just what church leaders need. And so it was kind of me like collecting the last few pieces. And so once I finally got to that point there in the tail end of 2007 and especially into 2008, it was literally like realizing that God was taking all the pieces of my life and like putting them in a blender where they actually made sense together. And so it was cool, but it was definitely a journey. And I joke and say that if you had told my 16-year-old self that one day my number one song in my catalog would be a song I wrote for preschoolers, I don't think my teenage self would have been very amused by that. But, God in his kindness waited to start revealing some of those things till I was in my late 20s and early 30s where I could see the win that is and the fruit that comes from it. And it's fun just to get to use all the pieces of my life that he has slowly curated and equipped me with to just do something that, does have kingdom harvest to it.
And so you would say you knew that you were always called to this. You just didn't know that it was going to lead to this.
Yeah. I just knew the headline of music, and just that music's fun and singing it and performing it's fun and all of that. And so, that's where it kind of started with, but that's fair. Like at that point in life, I had to learn how to get on stage and perform and, practice and sing on pitch and learn to play an instrument and learn how to count to 4 and 3 and 6 and, all the things. If you don't know what I just said, then that's totally fine. But, talking in a music term. So, those were all necessary pieces and it's not, certainly as a 9-year-old, I didn't need to know the full details of what all it was going to be. But I think, looking back on it, it all comes down to just taking one step at a time. And the Bible says the steps of the righteous are ordered by the Lord. And so that's what I always encourage and challenge people to do is just like, what's the step in front of you? And sometimes you have vision for what, quite a few steps down the road looks like. And sometimes you've just got to do the next most obvious thing to walk in obedience for what he's called you to do.
Absolutely. And as kids, we have dreams and wanting those dreams are not bad and we shouldn't just throw them to the wayside, as we grow up. It just might look a little bit different and there might be a practical. And your ministry has blessed so many others. Obviously, you've been, decorated and others have affirmed you in that through the Dove Awards. Share some of those wins with us that you've seen to where it's like, yes, this is clearly the path that the Lord's always been shaping us on.
Yeah. Just as far as like the impact of like my music, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of the stories that like just stick out to me is like, I'll never forget. I had this mom come up to me at a conference, showed me a little video. It might have even been like the video of her baby monitor, like over a child's crib, or toddler bed type situation. And she was just telling me a little bit about her child. And at that point in life, her child was mute. And the only thing that she had ever heard her child sing was singing along to Hosanna. And, like that's one of those stories that just sticks out to me just to realize like, I get to be a part of that. There's so many times even just like on a weekend that I'll be scrolling on social media and see a church, post a video of worship happening in a kid's space. And, I'll push play on it, not even realizing when it's going to be. And, then just like once I hear the audio and realize like, oh, that's my version. Like that's my voice that's playing in that room. That's the video that I had created, made that they're making worship happen with. I think, you know, in those moments, it just always is a reminder that it's like, I'll never truly be able to know or grasp this side of heaven, like how many lives I got to be a part of, you know, like, yes, I totally know it's not me face to face with every one of those children telling them the gospel, but by partnering with these churches and with these families that push play on my music, I do get to be a part of their faith journey. And that is super cool. I had a pretty impactful story just happened a few years ago where a young boy that had gone to a camp that I had led worship for that summer down in Texas. Few months later, it was in the morning after I'd won my first Dove Award, actually, I had a phone call where this mom had called in to the guy that handles my bookings and was asking for me to play at a funeral for her son. Her husband and son had been killed in a car accident. And, you know, hearing this story and just like realizing as well multiple things. Like one, it was a reminder that in life, there are people that are having mountaintop moments and there are people that are going through the lowest valleys all at the same time. And I think we often can get caught up in our own story and the details of our life and just the people in our immediate world. And we forget that just like at any time and place, all the countries around the world, all the people, like we're going through different stuff. And, you know, I had been having a mountaintop moment and was brought back down to earth really quick, realizing that this boy that turns out my music had impacted, and there was a song of mine called Super Wonderful that he really loved, and that's what they were wanting me to sing at the funeral. And so
Wow.
couldn't physically get there, so I made a video of me performing it specifically for him. But just hearing this mom talk about her son and how much he loved Jesus and how much, you know, my music had, you know, really impacted him in those preceding months, was just, it was a chilling reminder for me, because I realized like, okay, if we're real, the adults that took him to camp that summer probably did not go through the activities of camp that week, really thinking about the fact that, hey, there's a chance that some of these kids aren't going to live to see Christmas. You know, like that's not how most of us are doing ministry. We know that always could happen, but I knew for me that summer, I didn't step foot on stage, those services to lead worship, really thinking to that extent how important the things that I said and the songs that I was leading them in was. And so it was, you know, hearing about Jacob's life and just how this mom wanted to use this as an opportunity to really reach her community really just instilled in me an important reminder that just like, yeah, every single time we have an opportunity to do ministry, to step on a stage, to be a friend to a kid, to be a counselor at camp that just chaperones, you know, other kids in your local church, to have an amazing, impactful week, like all of that stuff matters. And we oftentimes think they have their whole life ahead of them. And the reality is sometimes they've got a few months. And so it's important that we live our life in a way that to make every single one of those days matter.
Yeah, that will preach. I mean, that's, it puts it in perspective, you know, on everything that we're doing and every moment, and making sure that it counts and to enjoy those moments. That's crazy on that song, because in the Davis household, that's probably our favorite Yancy song that gets played the most. Super Wonderful.
That's fun.
So
have you heard the remix of it?
Actually, I don't think we have.
Okay, you need to pull up the remix. So
Okay.
I guess probably about 18 months or so ago now, I released a remix of it. So it's a lot of fun. It's good to have a variation on theme and, you know, hear a favorite song in a little bit of a different way. So be sure to check out that.
I will. I absolutely will. And, that song specifically is going through the different attributes and traits of God, how big and strong he is, how great he is, and how wonderful he is. And it's essentially like a kid's version of how great thou art, I guess. And yeah, not at all lyrically, but
but I like that perspective.
But my son, we had a conversation the other day, and he's 8 years old, and he came up to me and he said, I want to follow Jesus. And he kept using the words, Jesus is just so wonderful. Jesus is so wonderful. And that's why I think that what you're doing is important. I don't know if that, there's not a clear-cut verse for a kid that's going to say that Jesus is wonderful. But in a child's language, breaking that down on who he is and what makes him great and why he's so great is so important. It could have been because of that song. It could have been something that he heard, but he kept saying the word wonderful. And I just made that connection as you were speaking.
Something I was thinking about before as you were talking about your son, kind of twofold. One, I'll tell you, super wonderful. I was inspired to write it because my oldest son loved superheroes, like loved superheroes. And so, when he was younger, I was kind of looking at him like, okay, like I want to write a song with this kind of idea of like superheroes and obviously relating that to God. And so that was kind of why I sat down to write Super Wonderful. And around the time that I was releasing the remix of it, Sparrow is my oldest son's name, and he was with me at a camp I was leading worship for, and he actually ended up doing the artwork for the remix version. He does graffiti, like illustration, and so the artwork for it is his design, and it's a whole thing. And I just kind of like had this like aha moment, even as a mom, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like if something happened to him and nothing else continued on in his life, if no other fruit was born in his life from this day forward, realizing that like he had inspired me to write this song that so many other kids have been able to, engage with the Lord, like to sing, and just realizing like his life has already had meaning and purpose just because he enabled me to put those words on the lips of this generation.
Yeah.
And so he shares in that harvest, I believe. But a very impactful thing for me, it's been at least a dozen years or more ago. There was a Christian rock band, shall I say, in the 80s, that was called DeGarmo and Key. And one of the members of that band had passed away kind of prematurely, really kind of a fluke thing, had a blood clot, passed away. And so this was like in the days that followed that announcement that Dana Key had passed away. And there were multiple people I was friends with, on Facebook, people I'd grown up with, leaders that had impacted my life. And it's back when everyone was blogging. And so these people wrote these like blog tributes to Dana Key and specifically the music and ministry to DeGarmo and Key. And I found it fascinating that these various friends of mine all basically were articulating the same thing about how this music had shaped their theology. And I remember like reading that and just being like, that's so interesting because, like I'd been in writing rooms here in Nashville. I had, sat down with people that their whole entire job is just they go into writers' rooms and they write songs every day. And, many of those end up being songs that get recorded and you hear. And I just was like, I don't think I've ever had a conversation with another one of these writers about how what we were doing has the potential to shape someone's theology and shape someone's faith. And I was like, that just was a totally different perspective. And I think even if you look back on the years that have followed in my own life and my own ministry, I think it's kind of a draw a line in the sand point where I just realized what I am doing is taking the truth of God's word that applies to all of our lives, but I'm just trying to chop it up in a small enough piece that whatever demographic I'm targeting for that particular song can understand. And just to liken this into like parent knowledge, you know, you might cook the exact same meal in your home. You might cook the exact same steaks on the grill or the same piece of grilled chicken or something, but the pieces that you cut up and put on your toddler's plate of that exact same chicken are very different than maybe what the chicken breast looks like on your plate.
Yeah.
It's the same meat. It's the same protein. It's just in a bite-sized piece that's appropriate for that age person.
Well said.
And so that's what I'm doing in these songs. I'm taking big biblical truths and just trying to make it be relatable to whatever phase of life this kid's at.
I did want to ask, because we've been talking a lot about, you know, personal stories and testimonies. You made the comment that, you know, you work with worship leaders and children's ministers to help the craft. When you're working with these fellow leaders, what are you after? What are you looking for?
Well, I mean, first off, I think your music has to be good. I mean, the truth of the matter is there's a lot of kids music out there that's horrific sounding, you know, that is, I call it nails on a chalkboard, where it's just like, sometimes I'll push play on something and I just think like, why does anyone choose to listen to this? Like, why does any sane adult I know like choose to play this for their kid? Cause it's not good. And I think there's many factors for that. I think a lot of people just kind of think like, oh, it's a little kid song. And they just feel like it can not be great because it's just this little kid song. There's some things with production about that. I mean, when I'm talking to like a church leader, you know, any pushback that they have where engagement is not what they want it to be really is going to come down to just a few different things. And that's what their music sounds like, who they have leading it, and what they're teaching that group of kids about worship. And so you can zero in on every one of those areas. And yes, you can look specifically just at like, okay, what does it sound like? What does it visually look like? Does it look like anything else that this child might be exposed to in the other minutes of their day beyond just this song, you know, that has the label of a Christian kid song on it? So I think that what it looks and sounds like matters. Obviously within that, vocabulary being used or attention spans, those things need to be considered depending on how young the child is or even how old they are. If they're in that 10, 11, 12-year-old space, like needs to be stuff they can relate to. But then, you know, who you have leading them, I think just, is it someone that looks like they're having a fun time? Is it someone that they can relate to, that they can, you know, have some ounce of them that like kind of looks up to that person and is like, I want to be like them, you know? I think that matters. And then of course, like what you're teaching them about worship, I think you have to do more than just say, now it's time to sing, you know? But you have to give revelation knowledge just of what it is that we're doing, why we're doing it, how to take part in it. And so, being able to equip any age group that you're leading in worship with just the information. You know, one scripture that gets used in a lot of other contexts, but I like to apply it to this one too, is people perish for lack of knowledge. And I think in the worship space, there's a lot of Christians that are perishing, that are not taking part in that to the extent that really they should be, both young and old, like all ages mixed together. For this one, just because they don't have the understanding of how much their worship matters, how powerful it is, and just how much delight God takes in it. And so because of people don't have the information, they're choosing poorly in engaging in that expression.
I like that. I like that a lot and fully agree. Yeah, we're not giving them something different. We're not giving them something that we wouldn't consume ourselves. Mm-hmm. They need to enjoy it. And I think that's what's stuck out about you Whenever I first saw you at a children's ministry conference, all those years ago, you usually get behind a program or a brand or a cartoon and you're thinking of children's music. That wasn't you, you're a person. You're Yancy, Yancy's not an anonymous group or anything. You have your cartoons and your cartoon looks like you. What are some of the difficulties in pursuing, whether it's through ministry or whether it's through your artistry? What are some of the difficulties that you've had to go through?
Yeah. I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, I think the biggest one ongoing, I mean, even if I'm honest in my current season of life, it's the financial side. On one hand, I can always look back and say, like, God has always been faithful. He's always provided. Of course, there's always more vision and ideas, of things that could be done if the budget was there to make them happen. And so many times I'm not doing something because there's not the money to do it. More so is the challenge. But, it's like even in this current, I don't know, it feels like there's been a big shift and some things in my life, even in the last 18 months or so, that I think ultimately is really all stemmed from culture and streaming and all sorts of things were just some financial resource that used to be there when things were in tangible physical forms. Once it gets chopped into what I call millipennies, which are pieces of pennies. When you have the plays and the reps and the rotations of Taylor Swift and it's millions, those micro pennies add up to still large sums of money. But my audience just is not that big. I mean, sadly in the Christian space, and it's not just unique to me. I've talked to major record labels. I've talked to mega churches that resource this area. And every one of them would basically say that anything that's ever been done, no one can figure out how to make it work and it be financially flourishing and successful. It's usually always being done because someone's choosing to just underwrite it because they believe in it. And so in many ways, it's oh my gosh, just Christian parents and church leaders even just need to support all the things that are being made out there. Cause it's there's plenty of Christian families that are out there, but just the Christian resources don't get the plays and the views of, even as you mentioned before, a Coco Melon or, all these other things that still Christian families are partaking of, and it's well, if you were just using all those minutes to watch Little Praise Party or, Listener Kids, something else that's out there for young kids. It's if you were just applying those minutes, viewing minutes somewhere else, the financial resource would just come our way. But I think, I think that's the biggest side, is just the finances to do it. But, God's always been faithful and I know he will continue to be.
I think that is something that needs to be noted and yes and amen on, the Lord providing. And I think it's so cool to see that, even as I met you about a decade ago or so. It's so cool to see that you're still in there. You're still doing stuff. You had a big year this past year and you're even working on new projects, even with your podcast. I think that that's great, but it does need to be noted about how what we are consuming is now being monetized. And I've even had to coach myself that even though I would not promote or share with others this type of art, whether it's through film or music, when I'm watching, it's actually, there's a monetization to it. Someone is benefiting, and I need to take that and I need to support those who need it. Cause you're absolutely right. I don't think it's a talent issue. I don't think that it's, even a knowledge issue. I think that there are plenty of skilled men and women out there who want to make good, godly music, film, artwork. But yeah, they have to work within their means and their budgets. And you see it in the church. Like the church, I feel like just doesn't fully understand. And hence why we have podcasts like this to plead with the church to support. This is how you support, is getting those viewers up so that those programming, whether it's through YouTube or, ads through some Spotify, they can help and support those who are making good stuff. So thank you for being transparent on that, because I think it is a legitimate issue.
Yeah. And I mean, just to highlight, it's like what you mentioned before, like, back in the day, if you were buying a CD or buying a tape or a video from someone, you're very easily probably spending $10 to $20 on said item, that now the intellectual property is not valued at even a fraction of that, really, of what then is being paid out from those streams. So it's like now more than ever, buying the other merch that an artist has is important. It's like, buy that shirt, buy that hat, buy that, cartoon plush doll that I have, like, because then that's how you can financially support someone where you're just streaming is kind of struggling to do so, or make a donation, to that ministry or something that has blessed you. I think that's important to consider. And just the importance of like sharing it. So if your family loves something, text it to 3 of your friends, that have kids similar ages. Engage with that content on social media by that artist or whoever it might be. And, very easily share something, when it literally will take you a few seconds to maybe just be like, oh, this is my daughter's favorite thing. Like, maybe your family would love it too, but like, just help spread the word. And just some of those things can certainly make a bigger impact than you probably feel like they could.
Absolutely. I know many other artists, if they're listening, they're cheering from the back.
Yes.
So, as we come into conclusion with this interview, I've loved learning more about you, your heart, your background, and a word that hasn't been mentioned yet, but your perseverance. You've been on this journey since you were a child, and as you said, you weren't always ready, and you wouldn't have always even agreed with maybe the path that the Lord would have you on. But it sounds like you've had such a beautiful journey, and you've ministered to so many people that the Lord has blessed them through your ministry, but also I'm sure blessed you through just being obedient in His word and in His plans. So as we are closing out, what should we look out for? How can we support what's going on with you?
Yeah, well, of course, you guys can find my music on any of the platforms. Just type in Yancy. You'll see stuff come up. If you see it, also say Little Praise Party. That's the music for younger kids. But if it just says Yancy, that's things I'm making that is great for your preteen, or even just you as an adult will still probably enjoy it. Sounds very normal. So definitely listen, push play on those things. I have a YouTube channel that's Yancy, Not Nancy, with a bunch of my videos as well. Social media, follow me on Instagram, and, again, like, comment, share the posts. Become top fans on people's Facebook pages, just because you're engaging with it. But yeah, I've got a couple new songs that'll be coming out soon. I've got a cover of That's My King, the CeCe Winan song, that will be out. And then also something I'm doing in partnership with a ministry called 90s Worship Night, where they're kind of bringing back some old worship songs and doing covers. And so I'm doing a cover of History Maker by Delirious, and that'll be coming out soon. But yeah, if you work in any space leading worship for kids, definitely check out some things I have. I have a curriculum series that's all about worship called Heartbeat. You can teach. I've got a book that I wrote called Sweet Sound, The Power of Discipling Kids in Worship, to just equip you in this area. I'm doing some coaching for worship leaders with a program called Chorus, and would love to have you be a part of that. And then, yeah, like I said earlier, the podcast, Stained Glass Kids, you can go to stainedglasskids.com. Again, I'm interviewing ministry kids, PKs, and just talking about their journey and their story. And everyone is so different and unique. And I'm talking to a few people out there as well that have walked away from their faith, and just talking about that. because it's kind of twofold. I want PKs to realize they're not alone, but I also want church leaders to listen to these conversations, because I realize there could be a lot of small changes made to shift the narrative, just of building healthier Christian families. And so, especially those that have given their life to given their yes to the church. And so would love for y'all to listen to these conversations and these stories. There's much to learn.
Yancy, thank you so much. You've been wonderful to have on here, and just to help people understand the importance and need for good worship, good music for our children. So I thank you, and I pray that the Lord would continue to bless your ministry.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So if you made it with us this far, I want to say thank you so much for watching or listening to the Cultivating Truth podcast. We are serious about spreading Jesus through spreading the arts. And with our fantastic guest, Yancy, we can have a great resource and quality music for our children. It must start now. We should not wait till they are teenagers, and definitely not wait till they are adults in order to begin shaping their worldview. Orthodoxy in our doctrine and theology is very much needed. And you heard Yancy say, these words that, whether it's her or those other Christians that you might be listening to, they're pinning the words that are going to be put upon our lips that we're going to be shouting right back out to the Lord. And of course, even with what we're doing here at this ministry, we're pointing out good quality music. This is fun. This is music that I give to my kids and that they enjoy, and I hope that you enjoy as well. If you would like to support the ministry of Cultivating Truth and Aletheia Legacy, please visit our website with the links below. You can go onto our website, which is aletheialegacy.com, and you can click the donate button. And if you'd like to support Yancy, please be sure to go to her website, yancynotnancy.com. We have a big campaign going on called Kickstart, where we are beginning to spread our message of creative discipleship, and we need support. We are a few $1,000s away from being fully funded in our Kickstart campaign so that we can ignite our Spread the Arts campaign. Thank you for listening, and remember that even our littlest minds can change the world one day. Blessings.